Fine.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining. I am honored to be speaking today to Guy Harris, also known as the bearded one, the gray bearded one. He has been around the block. In fact, I would argue he's been around many a blocks, considering his gray hair. Guy, thank you for being here. We are speaking about SME ecosystems, and maybe you can share a little bit about your experience in both supporting entrepreneurs, looking at organizations that support entrepreneurs, whether they're startups or growing businesses, and then to give the viewer a sense of how much experience you have and how much you've seen in your life. And we'll touch a little bit later in the show more specifically about the lessons learned.
Okay. If I look at my life, and I'm not embarrassed to say that I'm in my last month of being 66. First 20 years I got educated. I was a slow learner. The next 20 years I was with Deloitte as an accountant. I am a chartered accountant with grey hair and glasses, but I was most of my career with Deloitte and its predecessor firms was in the consulting area, including 2 years in Chicago. And then after Deloitte, I had 20 years with a company called Bell Equipment, which is probably one of the most entrepreneurial companies in South Africa. It was started 70 years ago by Irvin and Eunice Bell, then joined by their 3 sons. And I always say Irvin was an inventor rather than entrepreneur, but fortunately his sons were very entrepreneurial. And they've taken it from a farmyard or farm workshop business into a global business with partnerships with the likes of John Deere, Hitachi, Liebherr, and competing with the likes of Volvo, Komatsu, and Caterpillar. I always struggle to say the word Caterpillar for some reason or another. But to me, that's the kind of entrepreneurs that we need in South Africa. If we could get another 500 Irvin Bells, that would make a big dent, because his legacy is 4,000 people employed in South Africa. So without doing the maths, that would make quite a big dent in our unemployment if we could find another 500 Irvin Bells. I then had always wanted to do a socially orientated venture capital fund that was looking not just for returns but social impact. And this was long before the term social impact bonds was even invented and talked about. And after I left Bell, I started on my journey of social entrepreneurship, and I started it in very much the base of the pyramid, the survivalist micro entrepreneurs. After a year, realized that I was more my 20 years with Deloitte and 20 years with Bell. I was more interested in scaling businesses, but even scaling businesses need to start somewhere. So I've today focused mainly on scaling medium enterprises, so from 50 to 500 employees, ideally. Not many of those around, so I will look at the acceleration of businesses from 10 to 50 employees. But then that leaves out a whole big base of the pyramid, or the base of the wine glass. My wine glass analogy. The 70% of South Africans surviving on less than 6,000 Rand per household. And so what I also do is build pathways out of poverty. I look for repeatable, replicable organizations that are going to help motivated youth. I'm not interested in youth that are just waiting for a handout. I'll help with a hand up, but not a handout. Motivated youth who don't want to wait for government to give them a house or a job. They want to go out and do it, but they struggle with those first 2 rungs of the broken ladder. And so I work with organizations like Tumu, like Zio, like coding organizations like Ispani, which does brand activation and market research in limited resource communities, to help people get a little bit of work experience. So for example, Tumu is providing some of the back office support for the YES program, which is placing interns into businesses. So that's really my background. My first year in social entrepreneurship was with the SA Institute for Entrepreneurship, survivalist entrepreneurs. There I learned the reason why your jeans or pants have got 3 pockets. One's for you, one's for your business, one's for a rainy day. And most people forget about that. And by God, it does rain from time to time, although we do have droughts also. The business has got to have even basic record keeping, and some basic information. It doesn't matter how small it is. It doesn't need to be sophisticated. It can be on the back of a cigarette box. I then started working with organizations such as Simadisa, Silicon Cape, etc. I'm trying to do a area-based Section 12J venture capital company around what I call CLOP, which is Kensington Lungo Observatory Pinelands. And I'm looking to mentor organizations in those areas who are looking to scale from 50 to 500 employees, ideally. And then also Pathways Out of Poverty. I was very involved with a coding initiative in Langa. Unfortunately, that organization didn't end up meeting all of my criteria, and I was supporting Deloitte and Close the Gap, who have now since opened up in East Africa and are making a big impact. I've also done quite a bit of work in tertiary. I sit on my alma mater, UCT's Intellectual Property Advisory Committee, one of their spin-out companies and their private equity advisory group. I'm quite, although they're the competitors, I'm quite closely linked with Launch Lab at Stellenbosch and their Innovus program, which is really good.
I just want to interrupt a little bit. On that note, so you have clearly a lot of experience across the spectrum from survivalists straight to growing and scaling businesses. And I wonder if we can unpack that a little bit. For example, in the survivalists, what are some of the components around the kind of support that these survivalist businesses need in your experience?
Well, they need help in understanding business and just the basic business understanding. And they need help with record keeping. And it doesn't need to be sophisticated record keeping. It doesn't need to be a spreadsheet. It can just be a list of on a piece of paper. What is my stock? What have I sold? What is my income? What am I going to spend my money on? How am I going to source more? Unfortunately, a lot of survivalist entrepreneurs end up misguidedly going to be a tenderpreneur. And I've seen very few viable tenderpreneur-based businesses. I've seen businesses that have started that have been viable, that have been able to add to their size and their offering and a lot of profits by going after tenders, but once they've got a basic business. So the other thing that a lot of survivalist startups do is they try and be all things to all people. You can't do that. You must focus. You must focus on that product that the market needs, that you can deliver simpler, better, faster than anybody else. And yeah, unfortunately, in our society and in a lot of our schooling, we get our innovation beaten out of us. So we don't have that free-flowing, free-thinking ideas, the 14 soft skills that are so important, that we need to try and instill in our grandchildren and our children and in our budding entrepreneurs. Yeah, I've also got involved with TVET colleges, technical vocational education and training colleges. I used to be involved with Northlink, and I've now switched to the Council of False Bay because they've got a very good center for entrepreneurship, if not the best center for entrepreneurship at a TVET college at their Westlake campus. They're about to do big expansions in Mitchell's Plain and also Swartklip, and their new Center for Entrepreneurship, which will be at Swartklip, mainly servicing the Khayelitsha and Mitchell's Plain communities. And they don't only service the students, they also...
But what is it that you say it's an excellent center? What makes it an excellent center?
A center for entrepreneurship. What makes it excellent is that it's got the support of CEDA, but it's got good management that is connected with the community, that also understand the entrepreneur, understand the very small business. There was recently the Western Cape Entrepreneurship Recognition Awards, and 3 of those awards went to Force Bay College entrepreneurs. So it's got that recognition. One of the, and I was obviously conflicted, but I managed to get one of our students to come and talk at the USAF DHET Entrepreneurship Colloquium in Durban last year, which up to now has been focused mainly on universities, but I want to get focused or have an additional stream relating to technical vocational education and training colleges. because what I call the oil industries, the hair oil, the cooking oil, and the machine oil needs entrepreneurship just as much as your PhDs and the microbiologists and the person coming up with the new stent to deal with heart disease. So I'm fortunate to be Cape Town based, and I'm not saying that from a parochial point of view, but Silicon Cape has really leveraged our three major universities: University of Cape Town, University of Stellenbosch, University of Western Cape, and then our University of Technology, Cape Peninsula University of Technology, and then what I call our fifth university, which is the Medical Research Council. And the Westgrow and Silicon Cape have put a lot of effort into putting Cape Town as a startup capital. We recognize very clearly that Johannesburg is often the scale up because the market is much bigger in Johannesburg or in other parts of Africa as well. But I think Cape Town has really been the startup capital. If you have a look at your
but leaving aside the awards and the status of something, I'm more interested specifically in some of the points that you raised, which is, for example, you talked about localization or community engagement. You talked about partnerships between Westgrow, a government entity, and the three major universities. What does this partnership, how does it benefit the startups and entrepreneurs on a practical level?
I mean, Silicon Cape came out of a cooperation between, or initially, if I understand it correctly, by Westgrow. And again, I must declare conflict of interest because I have a family member in a senior role at Westgrow, but this all happened sort of a long time before I moved back to Cape Town. And I think that if you look at globally competitive entrepreneurial ecosystems, a lot of them have a good tertiary education qualification or institutions around them. We don't only have those major universities. We've got 6 TVET colleges in the Western Cape. We've got some private colleges like SIBA. We've got some private initiatives like Startup Bootcamp. You've got Bandwidth Barn. You've got Workshop 17. I've mentioned Launch Lab already. And if you look at the Andy map or the CIMADISA maps of entrepreneurship ecosystems, you'll see that the Western Cape probably boxing above its weight, and it's because it's got that the commitment and a very business-orientated provincial and municipal government that wants to be seen to be supporting business. Now, I mean, another good,
I want to ask on that one. You know, that's an interesting point. And when you say you've got let's say it's the government body or the Western Cape, but is acting more like a business, how do they deem whether they're being successful in supporting or in developing the SME support ecosystem?
Well, to me, there's only one thing, and it's the number of jobs created because of our challenges around unemployment. And if our ecosystems are not creating jobs, if they're only creating wealth for a small number of people, that's nice for that small number of people, but it's not particularly nice for the people who are still stuck in poverty and unemployed. So I personally focus on social entrepreneurship. So I don't give a man a fish. I don't teach them to fish. I try and invest, whether it's time, in their fishing business and help their fishing business disrupt the fishing industry. So you really got to look to measure the effectiveness of the ecosystem. You've got to say how many jobs are being created and how sustainable are those businesses. You can't have a business that can only survive in an incubator. And one of the problems with a lot of our incubators in South Africa in particular is that we create a dependency relationship. So somebody starts at an incubator and then move from incubator A to incubator B to incubator C. They never actually graduate to be an accelerator or a scalerator. And so to me, it's how many businesses did that incubator graduate into an accelerator? How many jobs, new jobs were added while that business was in the incubator? How much money was that incubatee able to raise when they were there? So those are the key things. But unfortunately, government is often, and here I'm talking national government around BE policy, has got the wrong incentives. You're incentivized to remain small, which means less viable. Big business is just looking for the points on the scorecard as quickly and as cheaply as possible. The SMEs looking to just go from one incubator to another, and the ESD suppliers, many of them are just looking how much money can they make out of it, and not at how effective the programs are. I think there are a lot of exceptions to that. I think at the incubator level, Fotola is one of them. At the accelerator level, Edge Growth and Endeavor are again exceptions that have been able to create viable businesses, graduating and getting adequately capitalized. But a lot of them are just, we apparently spend something like 30 billion Rand on ESD in South Africa. And I'm not quite sure that we get even 3 billion Rands worth of benefit out of it because of the toxic system, the wrong incentives from government, the big business only being looking to score points as quickly and as cheaply as possible. The dependency, it's a small business in an incubator is exposed to the same threat as a drug addict in a drug den, okay? They can become very dependent. They need to break that habit. They need to be able to break out. And the ESD suppliers, which unfortunately, and I know I'm one of them as well, are middle-aged, or I'm probably not middle-aged any longer, white males, are just looking to see how much money they can make out of it. And that's wrong. It's not creating the right environment for our country. So I'd like to see a big shake-up in the whole ESD supply and support systems. And I went to the budget speech of the new Minister of Small Business Development, and I said to somebody, I might have put it on Twitter afterwards, if she implements half as fast as she talks, we're going to have a great success. I think she's got a lot of good ideas. She's doing a lot of good things, but I don't think she's being pulled back by the bureaucracy and the vested interests. And what we really need is a little bit of disruption in the ES&D space. In that space, I'm on a WhatsApp group that's with some really bright people throughout Africa and the US and the UK and Europe. I think Neil Henriksen of the Koi Group does some amazing work. Sima Disa's done some really good work in Section 12J. Unfortunately, some bright tax lawyers have come up and potentially hijacked 12J, which means that it's not as effective as the UK EIS or SEIS system. So when people run out of funding in their business, and if you look at the typical stages of funding, the first is lean, minimize the amount of capital that you need. The second is self-funding, but please don't put your pension fund into that. I'm conservative enough to say that, although some people have been successful and have punted their pension funds and done well out of it. The third is family, friends, and fools, and I've been all three. I can show you the lashes on my back where I've lent money or invested in family businesses or friends' business where I've been foolish. I mean, somebody said to me, you can't lose money on a shebeen. Well, you're looking at somebody who's lost money on a shebeen and now owns property in a township as a result of that. So then after your family, friends, and fools, your next stage is angels. And unless you're Jewish, Muslim, or Stellenbosch Afrikaner, and I'm not being disrespectful to those three groups by using those tags, unless you're connected to an angel, very difficult to get angel funding. There's very little true venture capital in South Africa. I've said to the managers at SAVCA, the SA Venture Capital Association, that I want to take them to the Advertising Standards Authority, because they're actually the South African Private Equity Association, but it's more politically correct to be the Venture Capital Association. At least they're now starting to bring in a little bit more on venture capital in their annual conferences. But you know, if you're looking to raise 100 million Rand, there's a lot of people, but you've got to be able to survive a million Rand due diligence. There's not a lot of people who are doing angel investing. There are not a lot of people who are doing true venture capital. And that's the funding chasm. So after Lean Self and Family, Friends and Fools, which you run out somewhere between 10,000 and 10 million Rand, there's still a huge funding chasm before you get to the 100 million Rand. So those are some of the things that we've got to address. And then the entrepreneurship education. You know, the thing, who are the entrepreneurs? A friend of mine once said, the best entrepreneurs are in jail because they've proven that they can take a risk. Unfortunately, they got caught. The best entrepreneurs are sitting in your big corporates. So I think Alan Gray Orbis Foundation, fantastic foundation, but they're not doing what Alan Gray has originally wanted, except with the odd exception. And E Squared, I know, is involved in some funding. But a lot of those guys, when they graduate through the Alan Gray Orbis Foundation, get caught by the golden handcuffs. So they've got to go and pay back their families, the communities that have supported them, and get the high-paying jobs at McKinsey's and Deloitte's, rather than becoming the entrepreneurs that they should have been. I think we've got a huge need for entrepreneurship, but we've got far too many horses running around, i.e. the ideas. And for every idea, you need a jockey to entrepreneur. And we don't have nearly enough entrepreneurs. And we don't have the role model entrepreneurs, the people like Luvuyo Rani here in Khayelitsha, who started an amazing business. And unfortunately, Luvuyo, although he's got a tremendous personality, is often outmaneuvered by the drug lords and the gang lords. And the aspiration is to be the drug lord or the gang lord rather than the entrepreneur. And so we need to be celebrating our entrepreneurial successes. Yeah, sorry, I've been talking too much. You're going to have to edit a lot out.
So if I came down to Cape Town and I gave you a check, unlimited check, what is the perfect support ecosystem for entrepreneurs that you would design? It obviously has words like education in it. It has words, but it sounds like funding isn't the issue per se, but rather helping entrepreneurs become fundable. How would you design the perfect SME support ecosystem?
Yeah, I talk about uppercase SMEs. So I would take that money and use it for scaling medium enterprises, which I would prioritize based on their job creating potential, particularly entry-level upskillable jobs, and to help those entrepreneurs, firstly. The lowercase SME survivalist micro entrepreneurs are very often job rotating. So if I go down the road here across into Langa and create another nail salon, all it's going to do is put the other nail salon out of business. But if I go into Langa and create a jazz nightclub that buses in visitors to the big hotels in the CBD and the waterfront and Newlands and Constantia and all of that, now I'm talking about creating a new business, a job creating business rather than job rotating. So if you gave me a fund, a Section 12J fund, for which you would get a very nice tax deduction, okay, I would invest it in scaling medium enterprises and those that are going to create jobs, particularly your entry-level upskillable jobs. I would harness the various role players. I would make the connection. I mean, I as a privileged old white fart, or whatever you want to call me, have a really, really unfair advantage. Not only was I educated in the 20% of education in this country, which is excellent and world class, but I've also got the connections. I was brought up, I understood, I probably started reading annual reports after I put down Eden Blyton and Noddy and things like that in the famous five. So I've been brought up in that environment. So we have to, I'd love to see a situation where each privileged South African is mentoring 4 or 5 people from disadvantaged communities, but people who are not going to play on their disadvantage. They are motivated, what they call NEETs, not in employment, education, or training, but they're not saying, hey, the world owes me a living. They say, my God, I got a bad deal, but I'm going to go out and make the best out of it. You know, I was involved with child-headed households in Soweto, and I never once saw people, those young kids looking after their young siblings. I never saw the negative faces. I saw the positive faces, the opportunities. And I believe that we need to give people opportunities. I don't like this when people fail matric, they get given a second chance because you can throw away a chance. But if you grab an opportunity, so I'm looking at creating opportunities for people who are motivated, who are saying, I want an opportunity and I'm going to prove to you that if you help me get a coding experience and qualification and then link me up with Zaya because you're at a TVET college or at a university, I'm going to show you that I can be one of the best programmers, and I'm going to create some fantastic apps and things like that. It's those kinds of people that I would invest in. It's the Timus, the Hispanis, the coding organizations, and focused on disadvantaged communities. That's where the need is. And I wouldn't only put money in. I would put time in. That mentoring is important, and the understanding. So giving people online access to be able to increase their understanding. Just as if I go into Khayelitsha tomorrow, having never been there before, which isn't the case, I'm going to need somebody to guide me. When a guy or a lady comes from Khayelitsha into the Claremont market, they're going to need somebody to guide them. And we need to build that trust and understanding, or that understanding and trust is the better way of putting it, between our different markets and groupings in South Africa. What's the word? The base of the pyramid market is big. There's a lot of money there. It's a very discerning market because they turn over their pennies 20 times before they spend it. But there is a lot of opportunity in those markets. That's why Hispania is looking at brand activation in limited resource communities. So yeah, we could. You bring me that 100 million rand or the billion rand, and I'll invest it in what I call scaling medium enterprises. So not in your survivalist job rotating expanded public works, BSM levels 1, 2, and 3, but in BSM levels 7, 8, and 9, because those are going to create the jobs, give the work experience to people, and some of those will go out and become their own entrepreneurs. Going back to my Bell experience, I know that there are a lot of Bell people who learned at Bell and have gone out and established their own business. The biggest one, or one of the bigger ones that comes to mind, is Engineering Top Tech, which takes product off the Bell production line and customizes it for specific applications. There's a lot of other examples on the distribution side of Bell equipment, the contractors, people who are using Bell equipment. And I could talk till tomorrow morning about the kinds of opportunities that there are out there.
Yeah, Guy, thank you for that. There's a wonderful cartoon movie called Ratatouille. And in that, one of the cartoon characters says, not everyone can become a chef, but everyone can learn how to cook. In what I heard from you, you truly believe that with the right education, with the right hand-holding in markets which are foreign, or environments which are foreign, the Khayelitsha walk-around example, you believe that anybody can learn to cook?
Everybody can learn to cook, but they're not going to be able to design the best vegan meal necessarily. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity. I mean, I wish, and again, I must declare an interest. I've got 3 little granddaughters. 2 of them are 4 years old, and 1 is 7 years old. You know, they are very privileged to have my wife, who's a great early childhood developer. She's done a fantastic job with both of my kids. She's doing a great job with my 3 granddaughters. She does a great job at Kirstenbosch doing environmental education to kids, primarily from limited resource schools. It's that early childhood development that we need to get right in this country. And then the other thing is the focus on the maths and science subjects. The worst thing, I'm not interested in the fact that 81% got past their matric, because that wasn't a pass as far as I'm concerned. What I'm interested is in the 4%, and unfortunately it's declining absolute and percentage, who get more than 50% in mass. Not that I want everyone to become an accountant, an engineer, or an actuary, but those are the people who are not going to be caught by the loan sharks because they understand compound interest. They're going to be able to do the more advanced programming after the coding skills, etc. And we really have to up our game in our education. Our TVET colleges, when they go and compete in the world skills programs, need to be doing far better than they did in Russia this last year. Sorry. I'm talking too much.
And I love what you're saying. Guy, thank you so much for your knowledge, for sharing your wisdom and your insights. This was Guy Harris for SME Support Ecosystems. Thanks for watching.